This story is titled, Family Called Me a Loser After I Helped Them with Their Debt. And they told me, we don't need you anymore. So I canceled the surprise and showed them what they had lost. Hi everyone. Before we dive in, a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and makes sure you never miss out on amazing videos. All right, let's get started. All right, folks, so I don't usually share stuff like this, but my life's been a bit of a mess lately, and I need to let it out somewhere. Maybe I just need to vent, or maybe I'm hoping someone out there has some advice. Either way, here we go. This one's a bit wild. So I guess I should start from the top. This all began on what I thought was going to be a normal Thursday night. You know, the kind where you're exhausted from work and just want to chill. I'd barely kicked off my shoes, reheated some leftover lasagna, and was about to settle in when my phone started buzzing. I glanced at the screen and saw it was Mom. Now, Mom's not the type to call just to chat. Usually, it's about something important, like once every few months when the cable box doesn't work, or she forgot how to access her email. So, yeah, seeing her name pop up was kind of odd. I picked up, and the first thing I hear is her crying. "Elliot, we need you," she managed to get out. Her voice sounded like she'd been crying for hours. "Please, can you come over now?" I didn't even stop to ask why. It was one of those moments where your gut just knows something is wrong. I grabbed my jacket, slid on some sneakers, and bolted out the door. My heart was racing the whole drive over, and I was running through a mental checklist of what could have gone so wrong that Mom, of all people, was crying. When I got to the house, it was heavy. That's the best way I can describe it. Everyone was there. Dad, Vanessa, 28 female, Colton, 26 male, Rachel, 22 female, and even Grandma, who looked like she'd aged 10 years since I'd last seen her. The living room, where we all grew up watching movies and fighting over snacks, now felt suffocating. Dad was sitting on the couch, looking concerned and staring at the carpet like it had all the answers. Vanessa was pacing, chewing on her nails. Colton was slouched in the recliner, avoiding eye contact, and Rachel was curled up in the corner with her arms crossed. Grandma, my rock, was hunched in her chair, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. "Elliot, sit down," Dad said, his voice tired. I could tell just by his tone that whatever this was, it wasn't small. Turns out, the family was in deep. They were drowning in debt. We're talking massive, can't sleep at night kind of debt. Every credit card was maxed to the limit. The mortgage was overdue for months and barely hanging on by a thread. They'd been trying to hold it together, but things just spiraled way out of control. And as if that wasn't bad enough, Vanessa, my older sister, had secretly taken out a personal loan to cover some emergency expenses. She was standing there as my dad explained to me. I glanced at her. She looked ashamed. But what were those expenses? Nobody even knew at the time, but now the collectors were hounding them day and night, nonstop calls and letters. To make matters worse, the bank had sent them a foreclosure notice. And now the house we all grew up in, the one packed with every family memory, was on the chopping block. It felt like their entire world was crumbling, and they were running out of time to fix it. It was a lot to process. I just sat there listening as they explained how they'd tried everything they could think of. Selling stuff, cutting back on expenses, even asking relatives for help. But nothing worked. "We've done all we can," Dad said, his voice breaking. "I hate to say that, but we don't know what to do." There was this long pause where everyone was just looking at me. I don't even know why, but it felt like the weight of the entire situation landed squarely on my shoulders. Now here's the thing. I'd been saving for years. I worked my butt off at a pretty stable job and had a nice little chunk of money tucked away. The plan was to use it for something big, like life-changing big, but I'd always kept it to myself. And seeing my family like that, broken and desperate, I didn't even think twice. "I'll help, don't worry," I said. Over the next few days, I made it my mission to untangle the mess. I cashed out $70,000 from my savings, which was a massive hit, but I figured it'd be worth it. I started by paying off the most urgent debts, stuff like credit cards and utility bills to stop the calls and letters. I even met with the bank to renegotiate the mortgage so they wouldn't lose the house. Vanessa's loan was tricky, but I covered that too, just to get the collectors off their backs. By the end of it, things were stable again. The family wasn't entirely out of the woods, but at least the house was safe, and they had room to breathe. The reaction I got from them made it all feel worth it, though. Dad hugged me. A real tight hug, which is not the usual him. "You're the hero of this family," he said proudly. And for once, I actually felt like I mattered to them. Mom cried, but this time it was happy tears. Even Vanessa, who's usually too proud to admit she needs help, said, "Thank you, Elliot. I don't know how to repay you. For the first time in forever, I felt appreciated. Like I wasn't just the quiet one of the family who always stayed in the background. I thought that moment would stick. That maybe this was a turning point for all of us. But, oh boy, was I wrong. At first, things seemed fine. Actually, better than fine. I felt like I'd made a real difference. Every time I dropped by, the tension that had hung over everyone seemed lighter. Dad was back to tinkering in the garage, Mom wasn't glued to the couch, stressing over bills, and even Vanessa smiled a bit more. It was nice, but it didn't last. After a few weeks, the warmth started to cool off. Visits felt shorter. Texts from the family became less frequent, and the gratitude that once felt genuine began to fade. I didn't think much of it at first. People move on, right? They were just busy getting their lives back on track. Or at least that's what I told myself. What kept me grounded, though, was the surprise I'd been planning for years. You see, long before all this debt stuff happened, I had a dream to buy my parents a new car. Not some luxury sports car or anything ridiculous, just something practical and reliable but still fancy. Their old sedan, a clunky gray thing that groaned every time it started, had been on its last legs for years. That car was a running joke in our family. Dad called it Old Betsy, but Betsy wasn't running so much as limping. There was duct tape holding the side mirror in place, and the windows only rolled down if you smacked the buttons just right. I can't even count the number of times it broke down in the middle of nowhere. So I'd been saving for a replacement. It wasn't just about the car itself, it was about giving them something they didn't have to stress over. A way to say, "You've done enough for us. Now let me do something for you." After the debt situation, I figured now was the perfect time. I started doing research. What kind of car would work best? Something spacious enough for family trips, but modern enough to make them feel proud driving it. I eventually landed on a crossover, fully loaded with features I knew they'd love. Backup camera, heated seats, the works. It was sleek, silver, and brand new. The day I bought it, I was buzzing with excitement. I'd worked so hard for this moment, and I couldn't wait to see their reactions. My plan was all mapped out. Drive it over, park it around the corner, and reveal it after dinner. I'd pictured the whole thing so many times. Mom tearing up, Dad grinning like a kid, and maybe even Vanessa and Colton giving me some actual props for once. Before heading out, I figured I'd give them a quick call to make sure everyone was home. Mom answered on the third ring, sounding a little distracted. "Hey, Mom, you guys gonna be around tonight?" I asked, trying to keep the excitement out of my voice. Yeah, I think so. Why? What's up?" she replied, like she was half listening. "Just thought I'd swing by, hang out, you know," I said, playing it cool. "Okay, see you later then," she said, before hanging up abruptly. No follow-up, no questions, just nothing. It felt a bit weird, but I brushed it off. Maybe she was just busy. The drive over was something else. I had the car cleaned, polished, and looking like a dream. Every time I hit a stoplight, I'd catch someone glancing at it, and I couldn't help but feel a little smug. I mean, this was a big deal. It wasn't just a car. It was a symbol of all my hard work, my sacrifices, everything I'd pushed through to get here. When I pulled up to the house, I slowed down, making sure no one peeked out the windows. I parked just a little down the street, far enough away to keep it a surprise, but close enough to be ready for the big reveal later. Walking up to the door, I felt like a kid on Christmas morning. But the moment I stepped inside, that excitement started to fizzle. The vibe? Office really off. "Hey everyone," I said, trying to sound cheerful. Mom mumbled a, "Hi." Dad grunted. The siblings were nowhere to be seen, but I could hear Colton's music thumping from his room upstairs, and Vanessa was on her phone in the dining room, scrolling unfazed. "Everything okay?" I asked, standing awkwardly in the doorway. "Yeah, fine," Mom said, eyes still glued to the screen. It didn't feel fine, but I didn't address it. I wasn't going to let the weird mood ruin the night. "I thought we could all have dinner together tonight," I said, trying to sound upbeat. "I've got something important I want to share with you guys after dinner." Vanessa rolled her eyes, still not looking up from her phone. "Is it going to take long?" "I have plans later." Colton yelled something unintelligible from upstairs, and Rachel, who must have been home because her shoes were by the door, didn't even bother coming out of her room. Dad sighed, closing the fridge. "Fine, let's just get it over with." I wanted to turn around and leave right then, since the vibe felt off. But I'd already parked the car, already imagined how this night was supposed to go. So, I stayed. We finally sat down for dinner, but it was painfully quiet. I tried to kick things off by thanking them for coming together. Before I could even start explaining my surprise, Colton came downstairs, chewing a piece of bread. "Can I borrow your car tomorrow?" he asked, cutting me off. Mine's acting up again. I hesitated. "I need it for work in the morning, but maybe after—" Vanessa cut in, snapping, "Wow, so you can bail us out of debt, but you can't even lend Colton your car?" Such a big hero you are, Elliot. My head snapped toward her. Are you serious? I was just saying. Rachel finally came out of her room, arms crossed, scowling like I'd interrupted her entire life. He's always like this, doing stuff to look good, then acting like he's better than everyone. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What's wrong, guys? I've literally done nothing but help you, I said, trying to stay calm. Mom, who hadn't said a word since dinner started, decided to chime in. Elliot, we've got enough going on without you making everything about yourself. If you're going to cause drama, maybe you should just leave. Drama? I was there to give them a new car. How was that causing drama? Dad mumbled, We're not asking for your help anymore. Don't think you're the center of the world now. We don't actually need you. I was shocked. I didn't understand why all of them were suddenly throwing comments against me. Even my grandma mumbled something I didn't hear, but she looked disappointed. Something inside me snapped. I slammed my hands on the table, making the plates jump. Shut up! What the hell is wrong with you people? I shouted. I came here to do something good and this is how you treat me? But it seems that I got something you guys don't deserve. I stood and stormed outside the house. They all followed to see what's going on. When they finally shuffled outside and caught sight of the brand new car parked out front, their faces were priceless. Smugness, gone, replaced by pure, unfiltered shock. Mom's jaw literally dropped. Dad froze mid-step, and Vanessa looked like she'd just seen a ghost. This, I said, pointing to the car, my voice sharper than I intended, was supposed to be for you. I've been saving for years to get you something reliable, something nice. But you know what? You don't deserve it. Vanessa, always quick to speak up, stepped forward. Elliot, wait. No! I cut her off, my voice firm. You've all made it perfectly clear how you feel about me. I'm just the guy who cleans up your messes. Fine, but don't expect anything else from me. Not anymore. The air was thick with silence, the kind that feels like it could crack glass. I turned to leave, ready to put all of it, them, behind me. But then, out of nowhere, Grandma shuffled outside, clutching her purse I hadn't noticed before. What are you doing, Grandma? Vanessa asked, confusion written all over her face. Grandma straightened her back and looked Vanessa dead in the eye. I'm going with Elliot, she said, her voice steady and calm, like she'd already made up her mind ages ago. The family erupted into chaos. Mom almost fainted. Dad tried to hold her, and Vanessa launched into a barrage of questions. What do you mean you're going with Elliot? You can't just leave. But Grandma wasn't fazed. She turned to me, her eyes full of determination. You've always been the only one with a good head on your shoulders, Elliot. I'm done with their nonsense. She walked over, opened the passenger door, and climbed into the car like she belonged there. I didn't even have time to process it. I just got in the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled away. I didn't look back. The drive with my grandma next to me after all I planned for was awkward. For a good while, the car was silent, except for the hum of the engine. I was still replaying everything that had just happened when Grandma broke the quiet. Elliot, she said softly, her tone serious in a way I wasn't used to. There's something I need to tell you, and you might want to pull over for this. Her words hung in the air like a challenge. I glanced at her, trying to read her face, but she just stared straight ahead, calm as ever. I didn't pull over. I wasn't in the mood for another disappointment. I was already fuming from how the night had gone. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and kept driving. Whatever it is, just say it, I muttered. She sighed, shaking her head. Stubborn, just like your grandfather. That got my attention. She rarely talked about Grandpa. He'd been gone for years, and anytime his name came up, she'd get misty-eyed and wave it off like it was too much to deal with. But now she seemed different. You're not going to like this, she warned. Grandma, I said, exhaling sharply. After tonight, I think I can handle just about anything. She leaned back in her seat, her hands folded neatly in her lap, and finally said, Your grandfather left me money. A lot of it when he passed. More than you could imagine. And I've been adding to it over the years. I was confused. What? I thought you lived on a fixed income. You've always said Social Security barely covered your bills. That's what I wanted everyone to think, she said, her tone matter of fact. You've seen how your family acts. Do you think they'd leave me alone if they knew I was sitting on a small fortune? I let that sink in. Grandma, the same woman who once refused to turn the heat on in the winter because it cost too much, had been hiding money from the entire family. How much are we talking? I asked, my voice low. She hesitated, then said, Close to 7 figures. I nearly swerved into the next lane. Are you serious? 7 figures? And you've been sitting on it all this time? She gave me a sharp look. I'm damn serious, Elliot. And yes, I've been sitting on it. Because it wasn't for them. It was for you. For me? That threw me off completely. I'd spent my whole life feeling like the backup plan in my family. The one who cleaned up their messes but never really got a thank you. Why me? I asked, my voice softer now. Because you're the only one who's earned it, she said simply. You've spent your whole life giving to people who don't appreciate it. Tonight just proved it again. They'll take and take until there's nothing left of you. I'm not going to let that happen. I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt flattered, but I also felt overwhelmed. So, what am I supposed to do with this money? I asked. Whatever you want, she said. Invest it. Start a business. Buy yourself something nice for once. But don't waste it on them. That last part stung, but I understood why she said it. Still, it felt weird, like I was being told to give up on my family completely. When we reached home, I parked the car and sat there in silence trying to process everything happens. Grandma noticed me staring into the void and gave me a knowing look. She reached into her purse and pulled out the small, worn notebook she'd shown me earlier in the week. Its frayed edges and faded cover looked almost out of place in her perfectly steady hands. Elliot, she said gently, handing it to me. You've got this now. Everything you need is right here. You don't need their approval. I glanced down at the notebook, its pages filled with meticulous handwriting, account numbers, investment notes, and contacts for lawyers. It was real, tangible proof that Grandma wasn't just talking when she said she trusted me. I flipped through the notebook, my stomach twisting with each page. It was real. Bank accounts, stocks, bonds, things I didn't even understand. Grandma, I don't know if I can do this, I said quietly. I mean, this is a lot. She placed a hand on my shoulder, her grip surprisingly firm. You can do it, Elliot. You're smarter than you think. Just promise me one thing. What? Don't spend it on people who don't deserve it like your family. I know you have a kind heart, but you've seen how they treat you. They'll take and take until there's nothing left. This is for you, your future, your peace of mind, not theirs. Her words stayed with me for the rest of the evening. Then she got out and went inside the house, while I stood there, staring at the car, the shiny, brand new crossover that was supposed to be a gift. Now it just felt like a giant reminder of how badly the night had gone. I woke up the next day to find my phone blowing up. A flood of messages from my family had come in overnight. Mom had sent 3 long texts about how I'd embarrassed her. Vanessa posted a cryptic status on Facebook about some people needing to grow up, which was clearly aimed at me. Colton's was the worst. Just 2 words. You're selfish. Grandma noticed my expression. Let me guess, she said, sitting across from me with her coffee. They're blaming you for everything? Pretty much, I said, tossing my phone onto the table. Apparently, I'm the bad guy now. She sipped her coffee, unbothered. Let them sulk. They'll get over it eventually. But as the day went on, the calls started. First Mom, then Vanessa. Even Dad tried. I didn't answer any of them, but it was clear they weren't going to let this go. By the afternoon, they were leaving voicemails, each one angrier than the last. So you think you're too good for us now? Mom's voice crackled through one message. After everything we've been through as a family, this is how you treat us? I felt like screaming. How was I the bad guy? I'd done everything I could to help them. And the one time I stood up for myself, they acted like I'd betrayed them. Later that evening, Vanessa showed abruptly at my house. I opened the door and found her standing there. Can we talk? She asked, not waiting for an answer before stepping inside. What do you want? I asked, crossing my arms. She didn't mince words. You need to apologize. To all of us. I laughed, more out of disbelief than humor. For what? For trying to help? For buying a car for people who don't even care? For walking out on your family, she snapped. You think you're above us now just because you have some savings? Well, guess what, Elliot? Money doesn't make you a good person. I felt the anger bubbling up again, but before I could say anything, Grandma cut in. Vanessa, she said, her voice sharp. You have no right to be here, let alone demand anything from Elliot. You've spent years taking advantage of his kindness, and now you're upset because he's finally standing up for himself? Vanessa looked stunned. Grandma, that's not... Save it, Grandma said, standing up. I've had enough of your nonsense. Get out of this house and don't come back until you've learned how to treat people with respect. Vanessa's face turned red, but she didn't argue. She just stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there, still reeling. Grandma, you didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, she said, sitting back down. It's time they learn they can't treat you like this. For the first time in years, I felt like someone was truly in my corner. The day after I decided to ignore their calls, the messages started piling up even more. At first, it was the same cycle. Mom's guilt trips, Vanessa's passive-aggressive jabs, Colton whining about his car, and Dad trying to act like the neutral peacemaker. He tried to call multiple times, but I ignored it. But then the tone shifted. They weren't just upset, they were angry. Elliot, you're acting ridiculous, Mom texted. We're family. We've been through so much together, and now you're just walking away like we mean nothing to you? I ignored it, or at least I tried to, but it was getting harder to keep my cool. Every notification felt like a reminder of how deeply they didn't understand me. Grandma, on the other hand, was the picture of calm. She noticed me pacing around the kitchen, phone in hand, and raised an eyebrow. Still letting them get to you, huh? They're relentless, I said, slamming my phone onto the counter. She sipped her coffee, unfazed. Let them be. They'll scream and cry and throw tantrums, but eventually they'll realize they can't control you anymore. But they didn't give up, and came the night where everything in my life turned upside down. That night, Grandma and I decided to get out for a bit. We ended up at a small cafe where she insisted on treating me to coffee and pie, saying we both needed a break. For a while, we just sat there, talking and laughing. It was a rare moment of peace, away from all the family drama. But when we got back home, the driveway was full. Vanessa's car, Colton's truck, and my parents' sedan were all parked there, taking up every available space. My stomach dropped. They really don't know when to quit, Grandma muttered, shaking her head. The second we stepped inside, the tension hit like a wall, and the ambush began. This has gone far enough, Dad said, standing in the middle of the living room like he was about to deliver a verdict. We're taking Grandma home. I set my keys on the counter, trying to keep my composure. She's not going anywhere, Dad. She made her decision. Mom stepped forward, her face tight with frustration. She's confused, Elliot. She's old. She doesn't know what's best for her anymore. Before I could respond, Vanessa pulled out a piece of paper and waved it in my face dramatically. This is a power of attorney form. We've already spoken to a lawyer. If Grandma's not in her right mind, we're taking control of her finances and decisions. That was it. I clenched my fists, my voice low and sharp. You're not taking anything from her. Grandma stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. You think I don't know what you're up to? She said, her voice loud and clear. I've been dealing with your nonsense for decades. Let me tell you something. You're not taking control of anything. I've already spoken to my lawyer, and everything I have is going to Elliot. Every last penny. There's nothing you can do about it. The room exploded. Vanessa started yelling about fairness. Colton accused Grandma of being manipulated. Even Mom and Dad looked stunned, like they couldn't believe she'd gone behind their backs. But the chaos stopped cold when Vanessa shouted, "If you don't give us what we deserve, I'm going to tell Elliot the truth about his perfect little childhood." Everyone froze. I turned to look at her, my heart racing. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "Vanessa, don't," Dad said, his voice low and warning. "Why not?" Vanessa snapped. "He deserves to know." "Deserves to know what?" I asked, my voice louder now. Vanessa crossed her arms, glaring at Dad. "You're not his biological father, are you? Mom had an affair before he was born, and you just decided to raise him like it never happened." I couldn't believe what I was heeding. My chest tightened, and for a moment, it felt like the room was spinning. "That's enough!" Dad roared, his face red. "No, it's not enough," I said, my voice shaking. "Is it true?" Dad hesitated, his eyes darting to Mom, who was now crying silently. Finally, he nodded. "Yes, it's true. But it doesn't change anything. I raised you. You're my son." I stumbled back, trying to process everything. My entire identity felt like it had been ripped out from under me. "You lied to me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We didn't want to hurt you," Mom sobbed. "We thought we were doing the right thing." I shook my head, stepping forward toward the living room. "You didn't do it for me. You did it because it was easier for you." Vanessa looked smug, but Grandma wasn't having it. She stepped beside me, her hand on my arm. "You don't owe them anything, Elliot," she said firmly. "Not after what they've done." I nodded, taking a deep breath before turning to the group. "You've all crossed every line, and I'm done. Get out of my house, all of you." Mom gasped. "Elliot, wait, don't—" "No." I cut her off, my voice steady but cold. "You lied to me, manipulated me, and now you're trying to control Grandma. You don't get to stay here and throw your guilt trips around. Leave, now." For a moment, they all stood frozen, their shock almost comical. Vanessa recovered first, her smugness replaced by indignation. "You can't just throw us out like this." "Watch me," I replied, crossing my arms. "The door's that way." Dad stepped forward, looking like he wanted to argue, but Grandma raised her hand. "Don't bother, Robert. He's right. You all need to go." With a few muttered protests and some glares thrown my way, they started gathering their things and shuffling out. Dad paused at the door. "Elliot, don't do this. Don't let this tear us apart." I stared at him down. "You already did that when you lied to me." I shut the door behind them and leaned against it, the weight of the confrontation settling over me. Grandma gave me a small smile. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. The next few days were a blur. I barely ate or slept, my mind spinning with everything I'd learned. Grandma tried her best to comfort me, but there wasn't much she could say to ease the blow. But one thing was clear. I was done. Done with their lies, their manipulation, and their constant demands. For the first time, I was finally free. At least that's what I told myself in the days that followed. But freedom didn't come with the sense of peace I'd expected. I felt raw, like everything I thought I knew about my family had been stripped away. Grandma and I settled into a quiet routine, but no matter how hard I tried to distract myself, organizing the house, binge-watching old crime dramas, there was a gnawing emptiness I couldn't shake. Then, about a week later, I got the letter. It was a plain envelope, no return address, just my name scrawled in Dad's messy handwriting. My first instinct was to toss it. After everything they'd put me through, I didn't owe them anything, but I tore it open just to see. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Elliot, there's something you need to know. Come to the house on Sunday at 3 o'clock. Bring Grandma. And I stared at the note for what felt like forever. What could he possibly have to say that hadn't already been said? Part of me wanted to ignore it altogether, but another part, the part that still hoped for some kind of closure, couldn't let it go. When I showed the letter to Grandma, she frowned but didn't seem surprised. They've never been good at letting things lie, she said. Do you think I should go? I asked. That's up to you, she replied. But if you're going, I'm coming with you. I'm not letting them ambush you alone. Sunday came, and the drive to the house felt heavier than I expected. Grandma sat quietly in the passenger seat. She didn't say much, but I could tell she was thinking just as much as I was. When we pulled into the driveway, it was empty. No cars, no signs of life. The windows were dark, the curtains drawn. I knocked on the door. No answer. Grandma tried calling Dad's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. We waited on the porch for over an hour, but no one showed up. Maybe it's for the best, Grandma said. I nodded, but something about it felt wrong. Why go through the trouble of sending a letter if they weren't going to follow through? The following days were eerily quiet. No calls, no texts, no cryptic Facebook posts. It was like the family had collectively decided to go radio silent. I should have been relieved, but instead, I felt uneasy. Then, one evening, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Elliot, it's Rachel, a soft voice said. Hearing from my youngest sibling was unexpected. She rarely got involved in family drama, preferring to stay in the dark. Hey, I said cautiously. What's up? There was a long pause on her end before she finally said, I wanted to apologize. For everything. Her words caught me off guard. Why now? Because it's all falling apart, she said quietly. Mom and Dad are fighting nonstop. Vanessa's furious that Grandma's with you. Colton's still trying to figure out how to get what he thinks he's owed. And me? I'm just tired of it. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to forgive her. She'd never been as bad as the others, but another part of me couldn't help but wonder if this was just another angle. I don't know what to say, I admitted. You don't have to say anything, she said. I wanted you to know that not all of us think you're the villain in this story. She paused for a moment, then said, You've always done so much for this family, Elliot, and they've used you for it, over and over again. They'll never admit it, but I've seen it. They expect you to fix everything, to take on the burden, and then they turn around and treat you like you're the problem. It's not fair. Her honesty hit me harder than I expected. I leaned back against the kitchen counter, trying to process it all. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because I feel awful, she admitted. I've watched them take advantage of you for years, and I never said anything. I guess I thought it wasn't my place, or maybe I was just too scared to speak up. But now, seeing how far they're willing to go, how they're treating Grandma, it's disgusting. You don't deserve any of this, Elliot. You never did. I swallowed hard, emotions bubbling to the surface that I wasn't ready to face. Thanks, Rachel. That means more than you know. There was a pause, and then she said, I just wanted you to know someone's on your side. Don't let them pull you back into their mess. I won't, I said, my voice steady. Not this time. Her words stayed with me long after the call ended. I thought there was a sliver of hope for some kind of reconciliation. And at that point, all I wanted is to have some peace of mind. A week later, I got another letter, this time from a lawyer's office. Inside was a formal notice about Grandpa's estate, something about a final review of assets. It didn't make sense. Grandpa had been gone for years, and as far as I knew, everything had already been settled. I showed the letter to Grandma, and her face darkened. This is their doing, she said. They're trying to dig up anything they can use against us. Still, I decided to follow up. The next day, I called the lawyer listed on the notice and explained the situation. What I learned left me reeling. Apparently, Grandpa had left a secondary trust fund, something separate from the money Grandma had been managing. It wasn't a massive amount, but it was significant enough to cause a stir. But the most important part is that the trust wasn't meant for the family. It was specifically left in my name. I sat there in stunned silence as the lawyer explained the terms. Grandpa had set it up shortly before he passed, with explicit instructions that it wasn't to be touched until I turned 30. Why didn't anyone tell me about this? I asked. The family was notified when the trust was created, the lawyer said, but I was instructed not to reach out directly to you until the specified time. I hung up, my mind racing. All this time, they'd known about the trust. They'd known that Grandpa had left something just for me, and they'd kept it a secret. When I told Grandma, she wasn't surprised. They've always been good at keeping things from you when it doesn't benefit them, she said bitterly. The next time I heard from the family, it was Vanessa, calling to ask if I'd come to my senses about Grandma's money. I didn't tell her about the trust. I wasn't ready to deal with that fallout yet. Instead, I told her exactly what I'd been holding in since this all started. You know what, Vanessa? I'm done. Done with the lies, the manipulation, and the constant guilt trips. You want to keep living in this toxic cycle? Fine. But I'm not playing along anymore. She didn't take it well. You're seriously choosing Grandma over the rest of us? No, I said firmly. I'm choosing myself. And for the first time, I truly meant it. I'm finally starting to make plans for my future. Real plans. The kind I've always put off because I was too busy cleaning up everyone else's messes. I'm meeting with Grandma's lawyer, sorting out the details of her estate, and researching ways to invest the trust fund. The family's messages are slowing down, trickling in less and less until, eventually, they stop altogether. It's not the closure I pictured, but, honestly, it's enough. Grandma's still here with me, her wit and wisdom keeping me steady through everything. One evening, as we sit on the porch, she looks over at me and says, "You've got a good head on your shoulders, Elliot. Don't let them take that from you." I'm definitely feeling lighter than I have in years. And that's me, venting in here as I'm finally moving forward. Thank you everyone for sticking until the very end.